Well, we had a crazy week last week wrenching on the Newport, but we got Roger's 51 Bel Air back in the shop, so let's get back to her. On the last one there, we got the Mustang II front put in and got the LS motor mounted and got it steering again. Now it's time to go after the rear end, and as you can see, she's got quite a bit of a rake to her, so did all the math and figured out what I need to do for some spring perches to get her rear end back in there, to get her sitting level. We can deal with a little rake, but that's a little excessive. So once again, we're going to go backwards in time and get us a rear end. Scrapyard and fetch us a rear end. Maybe a drive shaft too. See what we come up with. And there's our rear end. Four-wheel drive S10 is the proper track width for these cars. Spring perches aren't going to work, so we need to cut them off yet and get some new spring perches built. Well, since nobody makes a spring perch narrow enough for these cars with the factory springs, I drew these up in CAD rather than putting a regular perch and then putting a block between to get it down to where we need to go. Figured, hey, let's just build it right into the perch and be done with it. And in doing so, I was able to figure out exactly what I need for U-bolts. And you can see I got it drawn in 2 dimensions there at the bottom. I just sent them files off to my buddy Chad, and he blasted them out on his plasma table. And voila, there it is in steel. The center pins on those leaf springs are 1.5 inches off center, so I've got that offset. And I've made these perches 5 inches wide just to combat some of that spring wrap. And they key together here, so get a nice open root when you weld her together. And yeah, that's what they're going to look like. Woo! Got that SOB manhandled out of there. Well, I measured up the perches on this old rear end to get our spacing right. And got them old perches lopped off this S10 rear end with the torch. And I got this side cleaned up, but kind of dropped the ball and forgot to order some abrasives online. So I guess I'll have to go uptown and pay through the nose for some. Well, when you drive across town twice and stores don't got what you need, you just break into old Crooked Iron Fab after hours. Got the axle up in here. I got her centered up, and I just tacked these together, just a couple tacks to keep them perches from falling apart. And it's not welded to the axle yet. I just got it clamped down and just kind of guessed on the pinion angle for now. But we're gonna have to set her down on the ground, make sure ride height's good. Might have to adjust the height of these a little bit to get the right ride height. But yeah, I'll have to shimmy underneath and take a check on the pinion angle. Hopefully we're close. I set her on the ground and jumped up and down on the front end a couple times and turned the wheel back and forth, make sure that front suspension settled out. And I think we had freaking nailed the ride height. It's got just the slightest bit of rake, maybe 1 inch front to back. So awesome. I don't have to cut them things apart. Now to try and shimmy underneath this thing and get an angle finder on the pinion and on the output of the transmission. So at ride height with the weight of the vehicle resting on the suspension, this is the easiest way to check your transmission angle there. I'm at 2 degrees down rather than trying to read it underneath the car there. But we'll have to shimmy underneath and check the pinion angle. Well, I'm halfway slithered underneath the car here, but I'm going to have to look at this video to see what that says because I can't get my head over there. So I picked the car back up in the air, loosened the U-bolts up, and rotated that pinion up. From what I could tell was about 1 degree. We're down 0.5 degree. And they say between 3 degrees, and if anything, you want to be pointed down a little bit to account for a little bit of spring wrap. So I think we got her. I picked her up and gave her a few good heavy tacks here. And now we'll pull this rear end back out of the car and weld her up on the ground where we can see what we're doing. It's nice when your junkyard axle comes with brand new brakes and hardware. They got perches burned in there, gusseted, and gave her the old rattle can overhaul. And now I'm working on my lower U-bolt plates. And I got to looking at this. I made my first bend in my brake and decided I was going to cut the end of this one off and weld it in the center as kind of a backbone so it doesn't flex when I tighten my bolts up. And the reason I cut that off there, I'll show you when we get that rear end back up in the car. And there's why I cut the front of that plate off, so I could reuse that factory shock mount. I thought I was going to have to rebuild it, but she ended up working out. I've got them U-bolts torqued to 50 foot-pounds, so we're done back here. I finally got a transmission crossmember back in here. I've been scratching my head on how to put this back together since the day the motor went in. But I just extended some tabs out here, and I'm wrapped around the top as well. This 1.5 inch square has got the nuts are welded inside it, so you don't have to try and fish in there and get a wrench. But like I was carrying on about in the first video there, this crossmember is really important because all that it ties in. So being bolted 2 bolts here and when it bolt here, it'll capture it in both directions. Well, all directions really. So I left the mount a 1/4 inch low. It can always go up, it can never go back down, so gives me some room to shim. I'm not entirely sure I got it back in the right spot where it was when we checked pinion angle, but will give us the ability to get it back where it needs to be. Well, that never happens. I found a drive shaft out in my hoard outside, and it's the right length. Just had to get a conversion joint for the rear end here. Getting a little bit of busy work done underneath here. Pulled the pan off to do a trans filter, and she's pretty clean inside. Now, another thing I like to check is this valve train right here. That's the TCC isolator valve, and that's a huge problem on these 4L60Es. That bore wears out. But normally there would be an anodized aluminum valve in there, but I can see that's a shiny steel valve and a different spring, so some aftermarket valve is in there already, so you don't have to worry about it. If you're inside yours, just Google the old 4L60E TCC valve flip. Pretty easy to make it right. Working on getting this radiator mounted, or getting it figured out what I need to do here. And here's the fan we're going to use on it. This is the same one I used on my 65 Riviera. If you've seen that video, it's out of I don't know, early 90s Volvo 740 turbo. These things chuck a ton of air. If you're familiar with the Taurus fans, these are similar to that, but they come with this pre-wired 2-speed relay. It makes install super simple and self-contained. So we're not going to be able to use the shroud. We'll make our own one, probably out of aluminum, but it's about 3.5 inches, not including the motor. So, as I said in the previous video, space is at a premium up here, and I've got exactly that right now from the front here to my cardboard. I want to leave a little bit of buffer there between the radiator core and the fan blade, so when that fan kicks on, it might suck in a little bit or whatever. I don't want to eat the radiator. But it's looking like I'm going to take these brackets here. Obviously, this radiator is supposed to be mounted on this side of the mount. But I'm going to take them brackets and flip them side to side, or flip them over basically. So the flange on this ends up back here. And everything's looking good for clearance so far. I'm going to have to bump the radiator up just a little bit to get the hose off of the bottom of the support. And conveniently, somebody's already done a little trimming up there. I closed the hood and checked everything out already. Crawled up underneath, and I can get my hand up on top of the radiator yet with the hood closed. So we're good there. So I'm going to cut them mounts free and mock it back up in here. Getting my fan shroud done here. Piece of, I think it's 1/8 inch aluminum. But bent 2 flanges on my brake, 90 degrees. And I don't think I've ever shown my circle tool on the channel here. It's basically a piece of round rod, a piece of brake line with a hole drilled in it with a jam screw, so this goes through and tightens up on there. And the old plasma cutter, stick it in there and that's all there is to it. Cooling system complete. We ended up taking this angle and cutting it off and flipping it, so we moved the radiator head 1.5 inches from where it was. And then I took another piece of 1 inch 16th angle here, and that's what this fan shroud's mounted to. That's 1/8 inch. Bent that in the brake, and as you've seen, I buzzed that hole with the plasma cutter. And you can see what we got for clearance now. Enough to get the belt on and off. Some breathing room. I can actually put my hand between there. So that's looking good. And I made this bung on the lathe quick and tigged that on there for our steam port, which is that little guy right there. Getting started on the fuel system here. Got us a tank sink replacement tank. And for the fuel sender, instead of buying their $200 unit, I salvaged the pump out of the donor truck. Also the fuel gauge setup that came with the Dolphin gauges we're putting in. We have to wait to see them, but that's pretty cool. I didn't know it came with that. Well, it's been a couple days since I turned the camera on here, but the fuel tank back up in there, and fuel system is all plumbed up. That's a 3/8 polyline, 5/16 return, high pressure filter. I got that finished up, and now I'm working on the brake system. I had to put some wheel cylinders in the rear axle, and got some lines plumbed across. Everything's clamped up, secured, proportioning valve, and all my brake hoses on. That one goes the other side. So while we're under here, I wanted to show you what we got going on for the old shifter situation. We've got the factory linkage, factory cable that we stole out of that 99 Chevy donor pickup. And we got the cable all secured up into there. And up in there, you can see that I've got another bracket off of one of those transmissions. And if you look up at the column, I've got another arm off a transmission. So reuse that stuff up top and got a shifter working here. So in the car here, we've got the original 3-on-the-tree shifter, and he's got some sort of mechanism in it where you pull back and it pulls on this rod. So we wanted to retain that shifter in there, keep the old school look in the car, and I was able to make that work. So here's what we got going on here. Like I said, underneath, this is another arm off transmission. This is just a lock collar from the old Tractor Supply, and a spring, a mount, and this is the old detent plate, if you see the notches in there, out of our donor truck, or one like it anyway. And then I've got another split collar here with a tab welded to it. I know it's kind of hard to see because everything's black here, but when you pull on that shifter, that pulls up like that and clears the park gate. And as you can see, you got all my positions here. Neutral, drive, all the way down to first gear. So with that shifter being so big and heavy, I was worried about with the car sitting, that maybe that weight of that shifter would knock it out of park, and just having nightmares about that. So I think that's going to work. Got all the detents lined up. It took some screwing around to get the height of this off of the shaft to get the radius right, the way that swings, to hit all my detents just right. But after several hours of screwing around, I got it figured out. And I'll show you what that looks like inside the car here. So we're in park. I know the lighting sucks in here, but you should be able to see well enough. Pull back, reverse, neutral, drive. And drive is straight out on that shifter. But yeah, we go all the way down to first. First gear, second gear, third gear. You get the idea. And going back to the brakes, see my proportioning valves down there. And this is the firewall mount brake pedal assembly from Walton Fab. Waited about a month to get that, but finally showed up. So I'm gonna get that booster mounted now that I'm done working with all this stuff, and the master, and get the rest of the brake lines plumbed up. We should have brakes. I got the booster mounted and putting the master on here, and looking at the end plate here. So it's got an adjustable screw in there, but it's bottomed out already. And this won't go down flat. If I just cinch that down, we had the same problem on the Buick. It's gonna drag the brakes because it's never gonna release all the way. So I took that off of there and put these washers in there, and that seems like the perfect distance we need. So that little dinkus there, stay. I'm gonna measure this washer and chuck this in the old lathe over there and turn it off that distance. If I go a little bit too much, that's okay, because we can adjust that rod out to get her back where we need to be. What a day. Got a proper mess on the floor again, and we're exhausted. Time to string some spaghetti. Gutted all the old tattered cloth wiring out of the car there. And I'm putting in a 12 circuit universal hot rod harness. And mounted the fuse box up in there, if you can see it. And while I was drilling the holes from that, had safety glasses on, but still managed to get metal in my eye. So nice little trip to urgent care for that. That was fun. But getting kind of segmented and laid out where it needs to be. This leg of the harness goes to the back of the car. It's got our tail lights, fuel gauge. I've also got a wire for a fuel pump in there. This whole gob here goes out the front of the car. That goes to the battery. And there's some circuits in there we're not going to use, such as, what's in there? There's a power antenna wire. That's one we can steal for our cooling fan relays. And there's a couple spare wires in there that I can take. And this bunch I got running on top of the brake pedal there, that's all the stuff that goes up under the dash for the ignition switch, headlight switch, blinkers, all that fun stuff. And of course, got to have your dimmer. So I'm not going to bore you guys with installing all this. We are wired up. Got pretty much everything working. Signals, headlights, all that stuff. Got a garden variety LS swap harness on here. I got the wires tucked halfway decent, so you don't have to look at all of it. And you can see the main part of the trunk dives in back there, and it's gromming into the cowl here. I repurposed the battery tray out of the donor truck, since I wanted to get it on this side, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to fish an intake pipe through here. But stashed up in here, we got our cooling fan relay, power distribution there, that's going into the main harness and into the fuse box. And them two purple wires there are the triggers for my cooling fans. That goes inside the car under the dash. It was just two spare circuits there that I was able to utilize. And see, I cut quite a bit of extra wire out of this harness. And inside the car here, I got her 99% buttoned up. Mounted the ECM up in the side of the cowl there. I made it so you can still put a glove box liner back in here. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine when people just jam the shit in the glove box and you open it up and got a rat's nest of wires. So I'll keep her clean there. And yeah, as you can see where grommet comes through there, fuse box, fuel pump relays. The output out of the harness is all up here running across the top of the dash. That's our cooling fan wires that I talked about before that we tied in over here. and the ignition wire, speedometer. Got these dolphin gauges installed. I pretty much just took the factory bezels and the mounts and cut the backs out of the mounts and made them fit in there. And they look like they're fitting the theme we got going on here for the most part. As far as the fuel pump feed, I was able to steal a circuit out of the fuse box here. They had a circuit for a cooling fan, which obviously we don't need because what I showed you up front there. And I was able to steal that fuse circuit and use that for my fuel pump feed. So I've got a wire running across, bunched in with these ones here. And I still need to wire in my brake switch here. You can see on the old Walton Fab pedal up there, that orange and white wire here. I need to build a bracket that comes down to mount this yet. But I needed a normally open, normally closed style switch so we could run our brake lights and our torque converter clutch release switch. We got us a cold air intake on here as opposed to a hot air intake, what I see on most people's swaps. Not a fan. But as you can see, I got some piping going on here. And that air cleaner's that's got to be almost a foot long. I opened up this hole that the old heater duct used to come in. That stuff was all rotten out and garbage, so she's gone now. But had to cut into the inner fender a little bit there to fish that air cleaner through. And you can see I got the air cleaner all taped up. You see it, Bruce? But yeah, we're coming right out, right to the grill there with that sucker. And there's plenty of room all the way around the filter, so it's not constricted at all. Also got the old puke tank mounted there, and I just got lucky. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. My spacing on my fan shroud screws were perfect for that thing, so. And to remedy this whole situation here, do a little arts and crafts. A little something like that. And turn that into some steel. Well, how's this thing go here? Bruce, how's this thing go on there? Something like that. Just like that. Anyways, I bent a piece in the brake there and used the shrinker and stretcher to bend it in both directions. And then at the bead roller, I tipped some flanges on the edge and tipped the flange here and did a bunch of shrinking and stretching until she laid in there. Something like that. Well, we've been jamming on this thing for a few days since I fired the old camera up. I walled that off so we get all cold air from the front of the car. I had to wire a few other things in. Got water in the radiator for right now, just straight water. I screwed around for a good 3 days trying to get a heater core back in here, kind of like the original one, but it's just not enough room. So we've got a universal underdash unit coming, I think tomorrow here. But our punch list is getting down there. See, only a couple things left to do. Our heater box, got to do coolant yet because that's just got water in it. Rear shocks will be here today. And need some help to bleed the brakes yet. I've got them gravity bled and I put the Mighty Vac on them, and I'm getting no air out, but still should do a little bit of traditional bleeding on them. And then there's only one thing left to do here. So I flashed a calibration into the ECM and got us a runner, boys. Even got a horn. Putting the finishing touches on this old girl. How you like that visor? Had to build some brackets for it. That must not have been for this car. Had to build a bracket here, and this part here was clamped down into here, so that, like, the visor was way down here. So I had to build this piece. These here, so that slides into there, like so. Just so happened that our part that we cut out of our fan shroud was the proper radius for that, so that made things kind of easy. But yeah, I'm going to put this side on there, and we're about ready for a test drive. Aside from some rattly windows and a little bit of a misfire, we got a number 7 that's misfiring randomly. I would say injector's probably stuck, but for a tape measure alignment job, this thing drives really nice. Back to the barn, laptop's dying. Gotta love the first drive, getting all kinds of different smells. Everything burning off, setting in. Here's the scariest part of a first drive. A car that hasn't run since 1976. The jaunt down the highway. I'm back at the barn here. Pulled the fuel rail off and pulled number 7 injector and get you in here maybe with some light. Turn the flash on. Yeah, she is wadded shut. So I better pull a few other them injectors out of that rail and check them. That's ugly. That's sounding a lot better. No more stumble. Of course, I had to put the whole set in, being a 99 that had the small 21 pound/hours in it. And I got 9 sets of injectors here, and of course, none of those. So she's got a set of 24.8s in her now. Good to go. Probably a little wind noise, but I can't get over how nice this thing drives. Only got about 50 miles on her. Most of that's been relatively light, easy driving, but I got after leaving the stop sign, going slow, and she made a hell of a noise back here. That's from the pinion yoke. So when you can on it, the suspension compresses, and yeah, we got a little conflict there. I had an idea that we might have an issue there because the pinion on that S10 rear end is offset this way from the center a little bit. So I think I'm going to come up into here and remake this tunnel back to this point right here. So we're not done fabricating just yet. Oh yeah. A little conflict there. Well, there's our before and after. Basically just widen the whole thing a couple inches, and the height is about the same, but I'm just drawing that highest point back all the way back here. Listen to that baby purr. Like 42 degrees out this morning. Ready to go put some more miles on this thing. We got 49 miles on her so far. Like to have at least 100 on before I give her up to the customer. But we got our heater put in. Have a nice little unit. I was able to retain the shutoff valve for the hot water, so it's not cooking you out here in the summertime. And got that working. Yeah, she spits out some pretty good heat. And under the hood here, the old ducting, I used some 4-inch exhaust tubing, and where that's walled off for the air cleaner, I jumped in there so we pull fresh air into the car. Just out doing a little finishing up here. Just flash another cal in. Give them a little bit of jam here. A little better than the stock configuration. That's gonna about do her on this project. I learned a whole bunch on this one, boys. It takes a lot more time, resources, money when you take a car that's basically just a rolling shell and redo all the suspension, drivetrain, wiring. Takes quite a lot more rather than just doing a simple LS swap and something that maybe already runs and drives. So yeah, definitely have my pencil sharpened for the next one. Thanks everybody for watching. See you next time.